In the interest of not allowing singular powers with enough strength and plot armored characters to exist long enough to matter, I suppose it's time we talk about the massive gold yellow colored blotch taking up over half the inner sphere. Before we get into the video, I want to address the slight break in continuity. As I said in the previous video about the Second Star League, I have already covered the events covering the Twilight of the Clans with Operations Bulldog and Serpent. Given that particular video of mine on the clan side of lore takes great care of explaining both inner sphere and clan perspectives, I have no reason to retread that ground, and if I did, nothing new or of value would be added. So the Annihilation video is my definitive video on that subject. With that established, this video takes place right after that video in the clan volumes. For those watching this video during the live premiere, if you haven't watched that video of mine, you might be a bit lost between the previous Inner Sphere chapter and this one suddenly jumping about 2 years. For those of you watching this after the premiere, I highly recommend going back and watching my Annihilation/Twilight of the Clans video and refresh yourself on those events. With all that said, let's proceed. While there is debate among historians as to the exact event that would cause the Federated Commonwealth Civil War to break out, all those tend to land firmly around decisions made in the 3050s. However, that would be a gross inaccuracy, as the true cause of the FedComm Civil War is the formation of the Federated Commonwealth itself. If you thought anyone would allow the most powerful nation since the Star League to continue existing, then you don't understand this universe. Consolidating power like that incites challenge from both within and without. Let us review. When Archon Katrina Steiner of the Lyran Commonwealth called for peace in the 3020s, it was Hans Davion of the Federated Sons who was the sole person to take her up on that. The result of the peace talks, as we know, led to an arranged marriage between Hans Davion and Melissa Steiner, where their two nations would combine in the wake of a succession war declared on the night of their wedding. But it was declared on the Capellans, so nothing of value was lost. With the destined child of the two royals to become the future Archon Prince of the Federated Commonwealth, that destiny would be laid upon the shoulders of firstborn Victor Steiner Davion. But some people can't leave well enough alone apparently, so the second-born child as Victor's sibling, a daughter named Catherine Steiner Davion, at some point decided she wanted everything, and embraced the sociopathic narcissistic behaviors to make it happen. One such move that earned her more support than she should have was dropping the Davion half of her name and going by the nickname Katrina, after her grandmother, who was Archon and a well-loved Archon at that. If that also wasn't enough, Catherine was wicked enough to arrange the assassination of her mother, Melissa, by hiring an assassin that would become known as the Dancing Joker a couple years later, though definitive evidence of this would not be known to anyone until much later. After manipulating enough events, she ensured that Victor would become the Archon Prince, but making him look like the worst leader the Inner Sphere has ever seen, despite him actually being rather effective. Though as the truth of events will be laid out, you'll see that Victor was simply just a step or two behind his sister, and no matter what he did, his actions were seen as inept, and it would all be because of Catherine. While I roasted the dried raisin, known formerly as Primus Mindo Waterly, Catherine is a special level of conniving bitch that I still can't decide if she is worse than that religious zealot wearing Comstar garb. The one thing Victor managed to do and outplay Catherine for once was his thwarting her efforts to become First Lord of the Second Star League, and opting to leave the political chess game completely by succeeding Anastasius Vogt as Precentor Marshal of the good half of Comstar. As with most destructive wars, the reason started small, but caused enough of a ripple in the proverbial ocean to build up into waves, and finally, into a destructive flood. The first of such events began on Solaris in 3062. The best way to describe Solaris' importance in the Inner Sphere is aptly put by the phrase, "Solaris is a reflection of the wider Inner Sphere." Simply said, what happens on Solaris in small scale is happening in large scale in the Inner Sphere. Catherine started by having the Comstar garrison moved off-world as she thought they would be loyal to Victor, when in reality, Victor at this point was very much not wanting to do anything beyond his new job as Precentor Marshal. Basically, if this was a Call of Duty 1v1 on Rust, Victor humbly left the game, but Catherine keeps spamming him invites saying, "Fight me, pussy!" As Solaris matches went on, the rivalry between Davion and Lyran stables heated up quickly, often leading to open brawls, and at its peak, It was referred to as a significant event known as the Solaris Riots, where there was open warfare being conducted in the streets of Solaris City. The Cathel system was the next major ripple in the waters, as the system was the location of the premier shipyards in the Federated Commonwealth. As any leader would do to secure great assets, Catherine wanted the shipyards for herself. I'll admit her tactics were on the clever side, but they were never going to work given the political shift she was aiming to make wasn't quite there yet. One of the things she did was ensure a Lyran officer was stationed on every single warship, as well as doubling Lyran garrisons on Cathel. When fighting did eventually break out between pro-Davion and Catherine's forces, it was just as destructive as the Solaris riots. When the dust cleared, the Cathel system would remain in the hands of those aligned to House Davion, though only just. The ultimate fire starter in this buildup, no pun intended, was twofold. The first was the assassination of Arthur Steiner Davion, Victor and Catherine's brother. Arthur was a growing figurehead in the Federated Commonwealth, even significantly in the Lyran half. When news of the assassination broke out, Victor was furious and blamed his sister for having Arthur assassinated on the reasoning that he was becoming a threat to her rule by growing into a more popular leader than she is. Correct or not, Victor temporarily set down his role as Precentor Marshal and joined the Davion-aligned resistance against his sister, where he would be welcomed and supported warmly as a hero of old. History would say the assassination of Arthur Steiner Davion was the start of the FedComm Civil War, but at the same time, this next event could be seen as the same war starter. But as the passage of time goes, this conflict was the first opening shots of the Civil War. We once again return to a world on the border of the Federated Suns and Draconis Combine, a world where a great massacre took place. Another one was about to be added to the planet's history. We return to Cantares 4.
Palace Command, this is 4-1. We've sighted a second Overlord touching down. We have heavy casualties, enemy units still moving in on the Palace. Please advise.
Hold your position, 4-1. We're mobilizing Palace defenses, but we need time to evacuate the royal family.
Roger, Command. We'll do our best. Who the hell are they?
Alert! The palace is under attack. All units, man your stations. Next warriors, you are cleared to mobilize and engage at them. Gunnery crew, you are authorized to fire at incoming hostiles. Air units, back palace personnel to Valley Point Echo immediately.
We've got these 4 lenses up the wall. Support units. Looks mostly like LRM launches.
Sigma Lead, this is Sigma 2. Any idea what we're up against?
Well-equipped strike forces. Probably the 5th Donegal.
That's my old unit. Why would our own forces attack us?
It was inevitable. Everything has changed. Sigma Lance, form up on my lead. Central Guard is Sigma Lance leader. We're moving out.
We have the royal family aboard. We can't lift off until those SAM launchers are taken out.
Incoming LRMs, get clear. Look out! Get out of the hangar!
Get a track of those damn launchers.
I got track!
Take them out!
Impact!
Nice shot, Sig 2. All right, on my mark. We break off and head for the central courtyard.
We'll fall back and try to regroup.
Incoming!
Activate AMS!
Sir! I got missiles
Eject!
coming in and
Eject!
operating right now! Oh my...
Sig 2, this is Lance leader. Do you read? Karis, can you hear me? Central Guard is Sigma leader. What's your status? Command. This is Sigma Leader. I've lost contact with Central Guard. Any receiving unit. I have contact with main enemy force inside Central Courtyard. I'll delay them here as long as I can.
The 5th Donegal Guards, led by Lord Marcus Roland, invaded the world of Cantares IV after the public denouncing of Archon Catherine Steiner Davion by Duke Eric Dressari. The response on Catherine's end would be heavy-handed, and would be the first showing of how she intended to rule the Inner Sphere, by mercilessly putting down any and all resistance, even if it meant squeezing blood from a stone. After the surprise attack all but annihilated the Dressari family, Roland's forces failed to find 3 of them. 2 of them were currently serving in the 2nd Star League, and 1 evaded capture during the attack on Cantares. They were Peter, Ian, and Joanna Dressari. With the former 2 returning to Cantares after news of their family's purge reached them, the 3 would lead a guerrilla campaign to retake Cantares IV. While Peter would be killed in action early into the war, Ian and his sister Joanna would see to the destruction of all of Roland's forces and kill Roland himself at the royal palace before he could escape off-world. Now, before you other lore nuts crucify me for speaking of this like it's canon, let me remind you on what Battletech/MechWarrior games are apocryphal means. Apocryphal does not mean not canon. It means can be taken as canon unless otherwise addressed in a more accepted source. Loosely. Considering that Eric and Ian Dressari are directly mentioned in a Civil War sourcebook, their existence is canon, and therefore, the events of MechWarrior 4 Vengeance are loosely canon within realism unless a novel or sourcebook says otherwise. A good example to refer to here is the canonization of MechWarrior 3, done so in a novel called Trial Under Fire. This novel takes the story-focused aspects of Mech 3 seriously, while toning down the more gameplay-like aspects of that story, such as taking out the endless hordes of enemies within 5 minutes or less, making it a more realistic day or multi-day mission before moving on to the next. Apologies for taking you out to address that, but it had to be said before carrying on. Anyways, back to the video. Victor Steiner Davion would assemble his forces in the system of Magorod, located in the galactic northeast of Lyran territory. He would set plans to dismantle Catherine's war-making abilities in similarly effective ways he used when doing the same thing to Clan Smoke Jaguar just recently, which would leave industry as intact as possible. Victor would set his sights on Coventry, which was a major industrial hub, and to Victor's benefit, the Duke of the World was a rather open critic of Catherine and was on the run already hiding from her retribution. Despite the importance of the world, the fighting between Victor's forces and Catherine's forces were on the tamer side, but this would not be the norm moving forward. With just a few weeks, Victor would secure Coventry with the thanks and support from the Duke. At the same time as the Coventry battles, rebellions on Murfid and Thorin broke out, which led to 2 large mercenary companies going at it due to them being set up to fight each other. Evidence of this dupe would come to light, and the mercenary commands would join forces and fight off the Lyran forces to success. With support waning from even the most staunch Lyrans, Catherine was quickly put on the back foot and began making more vicious orders, starting with the assassination order to kill a figure named Reginald Starling. For those unaware from one of my previous videos, Starling was the new identity for Sven Newmark, the former aide to Ryan Steiner, and the only living person who knew Catherine ordered the assassination of her mother. Loki agents would carry out the deed, but the outcome would remain murky due to Sven leaving evidence of his and Catherine's actions to his lover to find, a lover that was a secret agent in the employ of Victor Steiner Davion. Because of the muddy outcome, Victor was able to have enough wiggle room to leak the false news that Sven was still alive. Why Victor did this is clever, and baited Catherine into a perfect trap. While the assassination of Sven was fully successful, Victor did face one problem. The evidence he left was not enough to convince Catherine's strongest supporters and most Lyrans of the truth. Figuring there had to be more, Victor made a bluff knowing that Catherine could never receive enough of her own evidence that Sven was actually dead. So with him leaking that Sven was still alive, Catherine panicked, and just as Victor wanted, she went directly to cover the remaining tracks she left, allowing Victor to follow her right to what he needed to find. The Civil War would mostly be kept in major industrial hubs in the split nation, with rare cases of noble families denouncing Catherine being aggressively sanctioned or outright attacked, much like what happened on Cantaris IV, but not nearly as nihilistic. Victor would suffer a major defeat in the system of Halfway, when a Lyran general by the name of Maria Esteban set a trap that Victor's forces walked right into. With the next Whitting Conference coming up, where a new First Lord would be elected, Victor took the loss as an opportunity for him and his forces to take a moment and lick their wounds. This Whitting Conference was taking place in the Merrick system, where Victor was able to convince Captain General Thomas Merrick to vouch for Victor's right to speak at the conference, should Catherine bring up the Civil War. Like the predictable narcissist she is, Catherine mentioned the Civil War in the first sentence, putting herself up as the kind and warm leader willing to talk to Victor, who, in comparison to that statement, would make him out to be a heartless warlord. As promised, Thomas Merrick interjected, allowing Victor to say his piece. Victor would simply state that Catherine killed Melissa Steiner, and had no hard evidence, just as Catherine had no hard evidence of Victor's wrongdoings, which there really was none, contradicting Catherine's gaslighting. With that, Catherine received no votes to make her First Lord of the Second Star League. While Victor celebrated that tiny victory, Catherine planned her revenge. Rehiring the Dancing Joker, the same assassin she ordered to kill her mother, sends him after Victor's secret lover, Omi Kurita. The assassin would have trouble, as the same Smoke Jaguar elemental that was bondswoman to Victor during Operations Bulldog and Serpent was now guarding Omi Kurita. In his first attempt, the Joker did not expect to come up against an elemental, let alone one from a clan that was known for its brutally effective warriors. This attempt on Omi's life would fail, but result in the elemental Tiaret Navarsan's death, though not before nearly killing the assassin. The Dancing Joker would try again, and this time was successful in killing Omi Kurita. The result of her death shocked Victor so badly he retreated into depression for the better part of a year, only stirred out of it when the joint efforts of Kai Allard Liao and Isis Merrick brought him back into reality with enough focus to become the most effective threat to Catherine specifically. While not part of the Civil War proper, a major battle did affect the two nations enough to be a notable mention. In 3064, Clan Jade Falcon, led by Khan Martha Pride, once again sent in fresh troops to blood new warriors into active duty, sending in entire galaxies along heavily fortified border worlds in the Lyran Commonwealth. The Falcons cut quickly into Lyran space before getting bogged down in the Blair Athol system, where both sides met to discuss a ceasefire. Lyran General Adam Steiner was waiting on reinforcements from Catherine that never came, and the Falcons were getting unruly as their defeats affected their personal sense of vanity, with many trials of annihilation being declared against mercenaries and Lyran forces, to little success. With the agreement of further aggression to be halted completely, a concession of providing sparring partners to the Falcons from Adam's forces sealed the ceasefire. General Adam Steiner was now disillusioned with Catherine's Lyran alliance, declaring the entire theater under his command neutral in the Civil War. Attrition was the name of the game for the Civil War by the time 3066 rolled around, but attrition won out in favor of Davion-sided and anti-Catherine forces, and dual strikes on the capital worlds of New Avalon and Tharkad were in the beginning stages of planning. Victor decided on personally leading the attack on New Avalon, squaring off against his sister Catherine, who was protected by 7 regiments of her most elite and ardent supporters. But he had a missing piece in the Lyran half of the attack, as he had no single figurehead who could take the throne that the Lyrans would accept. Or so it would seem. Peter Steiner Davion, brother to both Victor and Catherine, had vanished to a monastery for former mech warriors choosing a peaceful life on Zanaya III, just after the events on Solaris that led to Kai Allard Liao taking up the throne of the St. Ives Compact, opting to excuse himself from the political chess game forever. Victor himself knew he would not be able to convince him to return, and instead asked a great favor of Morgan Kell to go and bring Peter back into the Inner Sphere. Kell would indeed succeed, with Peter agreeing with the sentiment given to him, that the Lyrans would not trust anyone else to lead effectively, and so would lead the invading forces on Tharkad. The reason Tharkad was important beyond being the Lyran capital was Catherine's Archon regent by the name of Nandi Steiner, who was a zealot in terms of supporting Catherine, and Victor knew that the Civil War would only end with Nandi Steiner's surrender. Early 3067, Victor would launch his attack on New Avalon, starting with a vicious battle in space with all the warships he could assemble, and landing on the planet itself after. Meeting up with Field Marshal Tancred Sandoval, he and Victor waged a months-long fight against Catherine and her elite troops. There was a moment where Victor almost saw defeat, but would be reinforced in the last minute by Sandoval, and the two pushed quickly to surround the Royal Davion Palace. Catherine had failed to escape, as she waited far too long before the noose closed in around her. Despite this, she felt confident she can talk her way out of any repercussions being the charming sociopath she is, but Victor would not give her the opportunity. Catherine would declare her surrender on the 20th of April, 3067, ending the Second Battle of New Avalon. At the same time, Peter Steiner Davion and his own Lyran-born troops, including regular army units alongside Sky Loyalists, the Galehounds Mercenary Company, and Clan Wolf in Exile, would begin landing on the Lyran capital of Tharkad. Peter performed perfectly, acting as the proper leader the Lyrans needed and deserved, his campaign progressing far more smoothly than Victor's efforts on New Avalon in comparison. It would not be too long until Peter's forces surrounded the Tharkad Palace, where Peter and Nandi Steiner would face off in a duel, ending with Nandi taking a shot to the cockpit from Peter after she refused to surrender. Nothing of value was killed in that duel. With both Tharkad and Nandi being knocked out and New Avalon secured with Catherine's surrender, the FedComm Civil War came to an end. Everyone expected Victor to take up the role he was destined and born to, but would shock quite literally everyone when he would abdicate both thrones to his siblings, Yvonne Steiner Davion, once again ruling the Federated Sons from New Avalon, and Peter Steiner Davion, the Archon ship in the Lyran Commonwealth. Small pockets of fighting would continue for some time, due solely to Catherine's supporters who refused to sit down. Catherine's hopes of talking her way out of consequences would be dashed, as Victor would release Catherine to the custody of Clan Wolf in Exile, being transported to a prison built specifically to contain her back on Ark Royal. However, even this internment would be short-lived, as Khan Vladimir Ward of Clan Wolf appeared in-system with multiple galaxies of his clan's warriors, declaring his exiled brethren, specifically Khan Phelan Kell, and the Kellhounds, to release Catherine to him, threatening a renewed invasion of the Inner Sphere, citing that the Truce of Tukid's 15 years of protection ended just a month before. However, only Victor could give permission to agree or disagree, and when he received that message with the threat of yet another clan war, Victor agreed to Vlad's request and handed his sister over to Clan Wolf. Victor, meanwhile, would be able to return to Comstar as Precenter Marshal, on the condition he never interferes with the politics of the Inner Sphere ever again, a promise he would in fact keep. Stepping back to look at the Inner Sphere as a whole, things have returned to the historical normal, and some other things have changed completely. The Periphery Kingdom of Nueva Castile began raiding the Lyran borders, and the Taurian Concordat formed a new buffer nation in the periphery known as the Franc Reaches. The nation itself was designed to dissuade the reformation of the Federated Commonwealth should they start a war with the Concordat as a reason to reform. In the Outworld's alliance, many Federated Sons-based companies pulled out of the Periphery Nation due to the confusion of allegiances during the Civil War. The ones that remained stimulated the Outworld's economy so much, their perspective switched to that of a peace-seeking nation welcoming people from the Inner Sphere with the same desires of living in peace. The Federated Commonwealth, the joint nation that scared the piss out of the other three great houses, a massive union not seen since the golden age of the Star League, was no more, and would never return. It would take decades before tensions between the two nations settled down into a more healthy rivalry. The FedComm Civil War spread across hundreds of worlds and star systems, with estimates saying that 80% of the supernation saw fighting on their worlds. Casualties were in the millions, and damages were in the trillions upon trillions of C-bills. Their respective militaries were similarly decimated, with generations of mech warriors effectively being sacrificed in the bloody feud. All those reasons put together would cause the Lyrans and FedSons to pull out of the Second Star League, and sparked a vote of no confidence in the Star League. However, at this same Whitting conference, a new member eager to join the Star League as foretold by prophecy would become angered, as their long-awaited prophecy was beginning to crumble into nothing the moment they entered the room. Peter and Yvonne would return to their respective homeworlds after the dissolution of the Second Star League, enjoying the hard-won peace caused by Catherine Steiner Davion's bullshit. But this was not peace, nor was it a break from conflict. Soon after they returned home, they would be surprised when they looked up to the skies and saw fleets of warships holding them hostage under the threat of nuclear annihilation if they did not rejoin the Star League. This fleet belonged to the eager hopefuls that were welcomed into a Star League that immediately ended that same meeting. The same people who excised Anastasius Vok's Comstar from Terra. The same people he considered a vocal minority with delusions of grandeur guised as religious faith. The word of Blake was about to begin their holy war. A jihad. Ladies and gentlemen, freeborn and trueborn alike, I once again thank you for watching this latest entry into the mainline lore series for Battletech. As always, I greatly appreciate your support and patience. As you all know by now, I procrastinate a lot, and most of it is due to the size of these videos. I have one more video to go before I catch up with my clan/homeworld half of the other lore videos, and I have some cooler, smaller projects planned regarding Battletech lore. I'll talk about those closer to the day, but they'll allow me to get more content out there more quickly, as they're bite-sized chunks of smaller stories in Battletech that deserve to be told. I hope you enjoyed this video, and when we return next time for the Word of Blake's Jihad, we'll be wrapping up a whole generation of important characters and meeting new ones at the same time. I have some cool things I plan to do with this last video in the series before I put it on hiatus while I do the other things I mentioned just before. So be even more patient than ever when it comes to this one. Whether or not it ends up working out, we'll see, but good things are in future for this channel and Battletech content. I haven't forgotten about my promise for more regular content, and I am planning to address that with the smaller lore projects after the Jihad video, so stay tuned. With that, I will see you guys next time. Take care.